What are people going through in organizations who serve their members? I have not heard this topic covered in any of the podcasts out there. We have a very small club of 17 people where members pay $67 per 6 months, and they join in the hope of improving job skills and communication. Most of that money, $60 of it, so $60 of the $67 goes directly to the parent organization. This is my first time investing in this kind of a setup. Now, I am in leadership as a membership VP, and I am hearing that as time goes on, we are getting less back from the parent corporation in terms of gas money. Members are becoming more reluctant to take on roles such as county or regional director. And I want to give members the most that I can because we all are paying so much. What are other people going through in similar member-serving organizations?
So membership organizations, and as part of the question, the person actually told us who the organization was and that it is a 501c3. So we're not going to talk about the specific organization because I don't think that's important to the conversation, because we can talk about membership organizations in general. So most membership organizations that are serving their members, like giving their members a specific benefit, are not organized as 501c3. They're organized as a 501c6. And what that means is that the organization itself doesn't have to pay tax on the money that it goes in because they're meeting some sort of community purpose, theoretically. So like a chamber of commerce is usually set up as a 501c6, and their members pay dues and, in theory, get some sort of benefit back from the dues that they pay. A lot of times that's in lobbying. Sometimes it's in networking, those kinds of things. So the only difference really between a 501c3 and a 501c6 in this instance is that the parent organization and the membership organization could, if they wanted to, take tax deductible contributions from the community to sort of support their community. And then that would be not subject to, they could claim it as a deduction on their taxes. And for the 50th time in the last year or so, we're going to say nobody does this anymore because it's too hard. So that's the only difference between the C3 and the C6 in this instance. So really you're talking about in this kind of membership organization where people are coming in, they're bringing their own money to be part of this organization, and they're expecting some sort of benefit in return. And to me, I mean, $67 every 6 months, like that, what you need to think about is that cost, is that useful for the amount of benefit that you're getting back for the organization? Because in this instance, because it's not a donation, it's straight up a transaction. It is, you are giving the organization money and the organization is giving you something back in the form of job skills and communication skills, right? So is that worth it? Is $67 every 6 months worth it? If not, then you have a question about what your product is. Is your product valuable enough? Are people not? Because to be honest, if you were to go pay, think about this. If you're going to just go pay a coach, and Stacey and I are familiar with some of these coaches that'll help you with communications, and they're really, really good, right, but they cost more than $67 every 6 months, right? It costs much more money to enroll in something like that to increase your job skills, right? So the question is, is the amount of money that you're paying going to match up for the benefit that you're receiving for the organization? If not, maybe the dues need to be higher, right? So if people expect their gas money to be paid so that they can drive around and increase the size of the organization, that's a question. Is that an important thing for this organization to do? At this point, this is not a nonprofit question anymore. This is a straight up just regular old business question, because this has nothing to do with, the way nonprofits are operated. None of the 990 rules apply to this. None of the IRS rules apply to this. None of the FASB rules apply to this. This is just straight up is what you're charging what you should be charging, which is a question that only you can answer.
I do want to hop in and say yes to all that. I also think that, Andy, I don't know about you, but when we think about just the idea of kind of a federated type organization structure, or like a chapter-based organization, right, where you have the national umbrella and then you have the local chapters, I hear a lot that kind of that value proposition can feel strained when organizations or members feel the parent organization is taking more than it's giving back. And I think that is also, so to the person who wrote this, I do think you're not alone in that. I think that's something I've heard over the years and still from time to time hear people talk about. And so I do like what Andy said, though, about like kind of the value proposition, because I mean, perhaps it's even having an honest conversation with your members about what do they value most, and and then how do you figure out a due structure or focus your kind of limited resources on that. It's amazing to me how many times we don't ask sometimes those really basic questions. We make a lot of assumptions about why people are a member or are a part of something, and sometimes it's literally as simple as, I want a supportive community, like to help me talk through or think through stuff. And so I think it also comes with trying to unpack a little piece of that as you're thinking about how do you structure this in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if the parent organization is taking money from you, like, they should be providing something in return that matches the amount that you're paying them. And if not, that's when you have a conversation with your member services representative and saying, look, we're giving you this money. Maybe your community is one where $67 every 6 months is like way too much, right? Then you need to talk about, like, maybe there are grants that you could get from the main organization. If they're raising money from communities where $67 isn't a big deal, like, maybe there's some way they can help you get some of that grant money back. I know that happens, like, in other sort of organizations where there is a like, maybe not necessarily a federated organization, but when there's like a national office that then works with a whole bunch of local offices, because national offices are really good at fundraising, right? They've got national reach. They have more money generally. They can kind of blanket the country. They've got more name recognition. The money's easier to come in, so they may have some money to send to you down the line. In this specific scenario, I doubt that. I mean, you mentioned in the email that you don't do fundraising specifically for the organization, and maybe that's something you think about, but it also might not make sense. People might not want to give you money just so people can get job training and increase their communication skills. That may not be enough of an interesting mission to attract donations.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board. Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing. Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacy Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
My nonprofit has more than 15 programs, and we'd love to utilize our fundraising events as an opportunity to spotlight individual programs, but ultimately have the money raised from these events go into the general operating pot. Is it acceptable to do this, or does this border on unethical? I've seen organizations do this at their events, but I'm wondering if it's all in the wordsmithing. Do you put an asterisk at the bottom of all the collateral indicating that the event will raise awareness for X program while funds will support all 15 programs? It's tricky, and we want to be good stewards of money, but we feel that theming the event will bring in more people.
I love this question. I love that the person is being really thoughtful about making sure you're not crossing any lines. The reality is it's really pretty common practice, and it is ethical as long as you're transparent about the messaging and communication, right? So kind of like what you said. I mean, the key, I think, with anything like this is it's clarity in your communication. You'll see nonprofits, I mean, Andy, you've probably seen it too, where they theme an entire event around program because that program is maybe their signature program, or people are really, it's something that's a hot topic in the news or trends going on or whatever. Like that, it's pretty common. And honestly, the organizations usually are using that program as sort of like it's a storytelling device to help donors connect emotionally with the mission. And that's good, right? That's just smart fundraising. But I do think like being clear about where the money goes is also important. So not sitting there saying, come support, like you can have an event for a program, but it's not like every dollar raised is going to go toward this program, and then you're not doing that, of course, right? That wouldn't be right. And so I think, what you'll see is just, if you're just straightforward, I think some language like, proceeds from this event support our organization's full range of programs and services, or support our mission to do XYZ, including this program, right? Like, so that's kind of the way that's the way I think you get around it. And I don't think there's anything to be shy about, like putting an asterisk. Like, I think you just own it proudly, because you're like, this is one of several programs we do, and your support today is helping make those possible. I don't think it needs to be buried in fine print. I think that actually makes it feel like you're trying to do something shady when you're not. It's just a matter of, it is a way to draw and pull people in, to build your audience, to share your story, and to get support. So as long as you're clear and use the right language, from a fundraising standpoint, I think you're on point. What about from like Andy? I'm always careful about these things, because I know sometimes, we've talked about it on the podcast before, right? Sometimes auditors and you'll see a direct mail piece, which is different than this, but still, like, something that people are trying to get money for general operating support or unrestricted support, but they kind of, if they don't use the right wording, they sort of force themselves into a corner where it sounds like, where the money does become restricted to a program. So does the same thing apply here?
Sort of. I mean, I don't think, well, it kind of depends on what the main impetus of the event is. So if it really is about if it's about a particular program and people are there for the particular program, you would think that, because the standard is like, what does the donor think the money's going to be used for? And the reason that we make it explicit, and I'm actually just got a direct mail piece from somebody that I opened yesterday, which cracked me up, because at the bottom there was like a paragraph of fine print about how the money was going to be used, which was, I mean, again, not the target market, but it was, for me, so off-putting. It was like, just say what it is. Like, put it in the main text, and don't make me have to, because as soon as there's an asterisk and there's fine print, like, all my like BS alarms go off. Like, why do we have to have this here? This seems really ticky-tacky and I don't like it. So if event fundraising is the only way you're raising money for your program, then sure, figure out a way to make sure that this can fund your entire operation. But as Stacy and I will tell you over and over again, it's probably, there's a reason people say don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that would be one basket, right? So you should have multiple streams. And if in that case, if you do have multiple streams and you've got money coming in that supports general operating, then maybe, yeah, you can target a specific event for a particular program, because you've got a better connection with the people there. You're more likely to, in my opinion, to raise money if we're talking about this one thing, and the money we raise today is going to go for this exact one thing that we've been talking to you about. On the other hand, you kind of need to sort of be, I think donors in general are smart people who are interested in making sure that whatever problem you're working on, whatever situation your nonprofit is designed to do, are interested in making sure that thing gets solved. And when we talk about, we have problems with overhead, we don't like that you pay somebody to do this thing, I don't like the font on the direct mail piece, that has nothing to do with a person that's interested and engaged with your mission wanting to give you money. That's somebody coming up with an excuse. Any excuse will do. They don't want to give you money in the first place. They were dragged to this stupid thing. The Chardonnay is warm. They're really unhappy. Why am I here? Now I'm upset because there's an asterisk. I didn't want to give you money in the first place. I got dragged here. The asterisk is now what gives me the excuse not to give you money at all. The reality is you probably don't want that person as a donor. They're not going to be a long-term donor. That's going to be part of that churn of like, it was a first-time gift and you never got a second one because that person felt guilted into it to begin with. And that's not a good sort of donor retention strategy. That's not why we want people giving to us. We want people invested in the whole mission. And the people that are going to be best at understanding that, especially individual donors that are coming to events or things, that understand that you as an organization, that this organization needs to exist in its current form, using all its program, with all the staff that it has, with the building that it has, with the fleet of vehicles that it has, that it needs all of those things to be able to deliver services in the most effective way possible. And that's the conversation you need to have with donors that then when we're talking about specific programs, like that's not even an issue, because they're going to say like, I want this organization to exist so that we can work on this particular social issue and not to be worrying about asterisks and fine print. So Stacy, you did specifically ask, like, what do donors do? And donors, what do auditors do? And they do come in and they'll say, let me see some direct mail pieces. And they specifically scan direct mail pieces because it's very common to accidentally restrict something with the language that you use on a direct mail piece. There's less of a risk in an event setting that, like, we had an event around this program, but we talked to everybody and they gave us money. And as long as nobody writes like this program only on the memo line of the check, and I don't know, do we still use checks? I think it's all electronic now anyway. Like, as long as there's no way for someone to like unintentionally restrict something, like, the auditors honestly have nothing to look at. There's no paper trail for them to dig into and say, you said this and did something different, which is what they're looking for. So I wouldn't be super concerned about it. But I mean, don't lie to your donors either. If they truly think that the money's going to be used for a specific activity, then do that.
Right. And I also think there's embedded in this question, because it's about like, we need general operating funding, which goes back to the larger picture revenue model that we talked about. But I also think, I mean, how many times have you heard, Andy, like a nonprofit that truly thinks like they don't understand kind of indirect costs tied into programs and how to like how to position that in a way, right, that you can get, if you build it into your program budget where you're like, yeah, we, this program wouldn't happen without whatever, like this staff member, this piece of technology, right? We need space for it, whatever. Like, and if that's built into the program cost, you're also not being disingenuous. Like, if it is about that program, like it's going and you're helping support the full cost of the program. So I guess I just also want to caution people to not get too, I think sometimes I find with smaller or younger nonprofits, they don't always understand. I don't know what size this organization is, but they've got 15 programs, so maybe they're past that, right? But the point is like, for those of you who are maybe like smaller, newer out there, like also realizing that like you don't have to be like, not one penny can go for general operating, because you're going to need some overhead to run your program, and that should be built into it. So I don't know. That's another thought.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good point. So So what Stacy's saying about indirect cost, and this gets super confusing because we use different words to mean the same thing. And basically, if I use the food bank example again, like if you have a program that is delivering food to children, like the food itself is one of the things that you're going to spend money on. It may be the biggest thing. It's one of the things you're going to spend money on, but you also need trucks, you need fuel for the trucks, you need insurance on the trucks, you need people to drive the trucks. They get paid money. They also have money put into their retirement accounts. They also have health insurance premiums paid. Like, so there's a whole bunch of other things that have to exist in order for that program to actually serve kids. And so when you talk about indirect cost, what you're talking about is really the full program cost of everything that goes into that. And there's very specific rules about it too. So the things that can't go into it are just normal, business activities, like we need to pay a business license fee because we have a building. We need to have security, pay for security so that people don't break our windows on the weekends. And also we need snacks for the board meeting, and we have to pay for donor dinners. Like, those are things that you can't put into programs, but lots and lots of things can be put into programs. And your accounting team and your finance team or your bookkeeper, if you've got a bookkeeper, should be working with you to identify what all of those things are so that your programs are what we like to call fully loaded, that all of the expenditures that are attached to those programs are actually being loaded into it so that we can say, yeah, all of your money went to this particular program. It didn't all go to food, but it all went to the program. And as long as people aren't restricting it to like lettuce, I think these kids need more Brussels sprouts, right? First of all, don't take when someone says that, you say no, thank you, right? But as long as people aren't making really weird restrictions, there's a lot of things you can spend that money on.
our organization is doing our best to cross-train employees and have our staff teach each other and share their knowledge with each other. Anyway, we started this new activity called the 3 things in my position as X that I want you to know. And the person in that position gets some time at a staff meeting to do a mini education session with the rest of the team. I thought this might be of interest to your listeners, so wanted to share this activity. And I'm also curious to know how Andy would answer this question if he were the CFO of a nonprofit. What would he say? What would be the 3 things that he would want his coworkers to know?
I like this question. I think it might be a trap, though. I think somebody's trying to catch me. because the 3 things you want, you really only want people to know one thing as what you do as a CFO is that it's incredibly complicated and you wouldn't understand it. I think that's the sort of the base position of anybody that's in a finance role at a nonprofit is like, just don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it for you. Right.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, and it sounds mostly facetious, right? But there's a little bit to that. There's a basis in that that's true. And what that is that as a CFO, and I don't know that I'm a typical CFO. I think having worked with people all over the country in roles that were very similar to my role, I feel like sometimes I'm kind of an outlier because of the way that I treated my responsibilities at the organization, right? So part of the problem with being a CFO is that you are then tasked with all of the compliance activity for the organization. Like everything eventually hits your desk. It rolls to the ED, who may or may not care, but the ED a lot of times will rely on you to make sure that all of the things are being done right. Because, for me, like I have tons of information about the 990. I know the FASB rules. I know UPMIFA. I know all of these super dumb technical details about how nonprofits are supposed to be. I know the state law. I know the federal law. I enjoy reading statutes and trying to figure out what they're trying to say. I enjoy reading grant agreements to try to figure out like, what does this really mean for us, right? And so for me, as my role as a CFO in an organization, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that all of that complexity, all of that hard, complicated stuff is being handled in such a way that everybody else doesn't need to worry about it. Like, I don't really need the development team very deeply into what the IRS regulations are. They need to know. So what I work on as a CFO is making sure that my relationship with other people and other roles in the organization is as good as possible. Like, because I work with, oh my gosh, I was just talking to, I won't mention them. I was working with a client someplace, and we had a COO, an operations person, and a CFO on the phone at the same time. We were talking about some stuff, and the COO, male, said to the CFO, female, like said her name, like we're talking about something, and he's like, and I won't say her name, is like, Danielle, blah, 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 blah. And it instantly, like, everybody's back went up, and Danielle just shut the call off. She just hung up. Like her little Zoom video just disappeared. Right. And it was like, so that's a very, I mean, I don't think it's ever that, it shouldn't be that bad, but that's a very common situation in organizations where the CFO is constantly in battle with everybody else. They're always having the development people don't understand how hard it is for us and the CFO to do all these things right. And the development people are like, oh my God, the CFO is such a jerk because we're trying to raise money. And they're like, no, you can't do that. No, that's a stupid idea. No, knock it off. Right. So you end up with this sort of adversarial relationship with everybody in the organization. So for me, like what I want to do, and the 3 things that I want people to know about like how I work as a CFO is that my job is to make your job easier. I'm going to do all the complicated stuff. When it comes to budgeting, I'm not going to dump it all on you and I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me what you need, but I'm going to make that process as seamless and as easy as possible for you. When I work with the board of directors, if I'm working with a finance committee, my job is to make them as comfortable as possible with the way the organization is run. They because as we know, boards are either not paying attention or paying too much attention.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
are the two extremes of boards. And you don't want them to be in either of those places. You want them in the sweet spot where they're like paying enough attention, but they feel comfortable with what's going on. So they don't feel the need to like stick their fingers all the way to the bottom of the pool. Well, that's a terrible analogy, but you just don't want them in the weeds, right? You want them in that sweet spot. So for me, it's all about making sure that things are being done right, that everything is like the T's are dotted, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, the T's are dotted and the I's are, those two, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so things are being done correctly, and that everybody understands in the simplest way about how we need to operate as a nonprofit so that we don't get in trouble, so that we can continue to do the work that we need to do so that the community becomes a better place, right? So it's about making it as absolutely smooth as possible for everybody else. And for me, so I don't know, I can't think of three probably, but for me, all three of those are the same thing. Like, it should be a pleasure to work with me. It should be, you should enjoy the conversations you have with Andy about finance stuff. I should be able to make you understand, like I have employees come into my office sometimes and say like, we've got this, the 401k, and I'm trying to figure out where to put my investments. And like, I'm legally obligated to not give you that answer. I cannot tell you, but I'm not going to say, get out of my office. I can't tell you. So what I can say is like, just so you know, I'm legally required to not talk to you about this. Like, this is not the relationship. Our relationship in this organization prevents me from giving you advice in this particular area, but let me help you figure out where to get that advice, right? The donor folks come in and they're like, we're having trouble with this. We've got a donor that's got all these crazy ideas and they want to do this. And mine is like, well, my position isn't, well, figure it out. My position is, okay, so what can we design for them that's going to make the donor happy, that doesn't fall afoul of all the rules, right? So it's about being a good communicator, a good partner, and making sure that my job is to just make everything as smooth and as easy as possible. I don't know. Was that 3 or was that 75?
I don't know, but it's, I love though, philosophically, I love what you're saying. Because it sounds very much like solution oriented and, like that partner word. Too often I don't see that in organizations, and it always bothers me. And you see it, right? You'll hear like the evil, right? Like everyone avoids finance because they feel we've joked about on this podcast. It's the big no, like the big person who says no, but it's also about like, how do you develop the rapport and relationship where it can be like, Andy, like, I need your help thinking through if there's a way to make this happen. Like, instead of just, right. Or when you say no, like, and having a CFO, and you're awesome like that because you are one of those people that's not going to just be like, no, go figure it, like, no, right? Like, and I'm sure some CFOs do operate that way because they don't have time, or fill in the blank. They don't want to do that. But like, yeah, like, how do you make the CFO your best friend in the organization? Because they can actually be a huge ally, particularly in thinking through with things that can both be in compliance with what needs to be in compliance, but also like help whoever you're helping, donor, client, whatever. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and there's just so many, especially in that position specifically, there's so many subtle things that most nonprofits do that really put a barrier between the CFO and the rest of the staff. So one of them is like budget enforcement. So you do a budget, the process is stupid. It takes a long time. Inevitably, there are arbitrary cuts, and you end up with like something that you didn't ask for, and somebody else has more than they need. And so everybody's already dissatisfied. And so then you throw on top of that, you have this goofy purchase order process where before you buy anything, you have to get approval from like 9 people who sign off on all this nonsense. And that sort of just arbitrary paternal management of cash is totally unnecessary. It's an artifact of when we had physical checks that we needed to sign. And remember that where you'd have to get 2 signatures on a check? Oh, yeah. I don't know how many times, we go to an organization, you need 2 signatures on that check. I'm like, why? You've got positive pay. We've got an accounting system that keeps track of everything. We're approving the PO at the start so that we know it's available because it was part of the budget. And all I get to say is, do we have the cash available? That's a yes or no question. Why am I driving across town to get a board member's signature on this because the dollar amount is $50,001? That's completely absurd. Let's not do that. Yeah. Right. So like there's just all these like really weird specific things for the CFO that always makes it so like such an adversarial position. They really want to make sure that, and it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't make the organization run more effectively. It doesn't make people nicer to each other. It's just a really terrible way to work things.
Hey, podcast listeners, it's Stacey Wedding here. Hey, I wanted to invite you to an upcoming virtual workshop that I'm hosting on June 17th. It's on the 6 types of working genius, this productivity and team building framework that I was certified in a couple of years ago and that I'm super passionate about. It's really been a game changer for me and my work with clients, and a lot of nonprofit teams that I've worked with have found it to be pretty cool and great way to get people working together more effectively, productively, and with less of the dysfunction that oftentimes comes up in teams. So I hope you'll join me. You can find details below in the link in the show notes.